Good. Welcome. It's so great to have all of you here. My name's Martha Masnevsky. As Inka said, I'm an organizational behavior and leadership professor at Ivey. I am an Ivey grad. I graduated from the PhD program in 1994, went for the MBA, loved it so much I stayed. And then since then, I've been privileged and lucky to have a career kind of all over the world. I was out of Canada for 22 years, working with executives literally from Johannesburg to Yokohama in every sector, humanitarian and other things. My favorite thing to do is to talk about leadership of new things going on in organizations with people who are putting it in practice right now and creating really good learning conversations out of that. So I was so pleased to be asked to moderate today, which is exactly what we're doing. So I'm going to be joined by three panelists. I'm going to ask them to come up now. Don't leave me up here alone. And I say joined by, really, these are the stars. I'm just creating or shaping the conversation. They are the conversation. Yeah, we've got a couple of mics there, so you'll pass them around. Great, thank you. So we have Caroline Gale in the middle, who is here at Accenture, a managing partner at Accenture, doing data and data analytics and AI here at Accenture. And beside her, Chris Jenkins, yeah, her colleague, who's also, sorry, you're financial services. So you see what happened when I didn't check my notes? Financial services, data analytics, AI. So a lot of great technology, and here beside me, Jennifer Gibbs, Chief Data Officer of CIBC, and also very involved in the workforce transformations around this. So I'm going to ask them to each give themselves a little bit more of an introduction so you have a better sense of who they are, and then we'll jump into the meat of the conversation.
Hello. Okay.
There we go.
Fantastic to be here. I am Jennifer Gibbs. As mentioned, I'm the Chief Data Officer at CIBC. I have been in technology data roles for over 25 years. And also I am an executive coach, and I am also very passionate about living my greatness and helping other people do in particular, to do the same, in particular women. So pleasure to be here and talk about inclusion and the intersection of inclusion and innovation.
Super, thank you. Carolyn Gale, so thanks Jennifer. Carolyn Gale, been at Accenture for a reasonably long time. My current role, I run our technology financial services practice in Canada, and most of our work is actually in data and AI. In addition to having that role, I also am responsible for our diversity, equity, and inclusion practice. I run our mentorship program for BIPOC employees. I'm very, very excited to see those of you who are in the audience. And I think this is a topic that we'll all be interested in. One of my favorite people, and Jennifer's favorite people, walked into the room, is Nkechi there. Over to you, Chris, who I work with a lot.
Hi, everyone. Carolyn keeps me very busy. Yeah. I also spend time in the world of banking, insurance. Used to work at CIBC as well. Ex-Western alumni, engineering, sorry, not Ivy. Won't hold that against me.
You're never an ex-alumni.
No, sorry.
Unless you do something really illegal or something and we take your degree away. Which
I do
haven't. So.
I do work at the RCMP as well, but I can't talk about that work. What else about me? So I've been in kind of data analytics and AI since I left Western well before anybody was talking about AI. I've been living and breathing it for 20 years between Australia and here. I would say I would say I don't have as much diversity in my life as I would say on the male side. I have, once I married oldest of 5 girls. What most people don't know is they all live within 200 meters of my house. So I am surrounded by my wife and her sisters all the time. So I feel like I'm living International Women's Day almost every day.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. But I love having them around, and I've learned so much from them. So, and I also coach kids hockey, both boys and girls, 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. Brings me a lot of joy. Trying to teach them to have fun, what it means to be part of the community, part of the team, and gets me away from work once in a while.
Nice. Thank you. Great panel, huh? Love it. I'm really excited to be having this topic. So AI is on everybody's mind right now. What's the impact? What does it mean? How do we use it? What is it good? Is it not so good? And at Ivy, everybody wants to talk about AI, and I know in your lives too. The idea of combining AI and looking at on International Women's Day, and particularly focusing on women at the workplace in AI, I think is a really important and interesting focus on this. Before we jump into that part, what I'd love to just hear from all three of you, if we look at, we're looking especially at recruiting and empowering people. So AI, recruitment, we hear horror stories, we hear good things. Just in general, what would you like to tell us? What do you think we ought to know about AI and recruiting and empowering people?
I would say, because this is a part of my life, we just had a call where we also have a specific DEI recruiting team at Accenture, in addition to the other broader recruiting team. And part of what we look at is how do we ensure that there is fairness? And so whatever, you can't just say, you know, AI is coming in and we'll look at this and the world will then be perfect. I mean, it's only as good as, you know, what it's been trained to do. And we have to acknowledge that there are inherent biases. And something that we like to look at is to ensure that people are aware that there's certain things that you can control. If there's a certain role that you're looking for, you need to know people aren't reading resumes by themselves anymore. There are thousands, right? So you'd have some bot or something looking at it. So therefore you should know, for example, in terms of what's in your control, what are the hot topics in your area? And not to be fake, but you need to make sure that your resume reflects that, which in reality should influence you to make sure you're on top of what's happening in your industry. So you actually have control. I think a lot of people are very afraid about, and you know, I think we'll all speak to a part of this about what, you know, AI is going to do to jobs and it's going to disadvantage. And, you know, there is that, we'll have that discussion, but there are things that you can address and you can do yourself. And those are just things that you should be doing. You should know, based on whatever part of the workforce you are, what then is the newer thing that is happening, and how do you ensure not only are you learning about it, but you're updating anything that exists out there about you, so you can be referenced when a bot or whatever is reading your resume, they can pick that up about yourself.
I really appreciate that perspective, that it's kind of a means to an end. You should be updating yourself all the time anyway. It just happens that now we've got bots that are going to tell it to measure that. But that's not why you're doing it. It's not the only reason. Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just add, I love Carolyn's points. And if we think about innovation in general and we apply it to inclusion, and I think you mentioned this really is about how are you leaning your career and the way you position yourself into the future. And I'm just going to recall a story. I was on the school board for my kids back in high school, and they were talking about social media. And there were a whole bunch of people around the room talking about how horrible it was and terrifying it was. And I'm the tech person there sitting there thinking, this is also amazing. My daughter's running a business in grade 7, a little business about like there's so many innovations and entrepreneurial opportunities. And so I would say similarly, whether it's AI or anything else, that you think of it as something that's powerful and therefore you respect it, but you also learn about it and accept that, you know, this is what's here. So to Carolyn's point, AI is another example of that we need to understand that it's a powerful innovation. It can be risky and we need to make sure we're mindful of those risks, but we can also lean into it and understand how can we use it to our advantage, how can we present ourselves in a way that works with the technologies that are being used in this case in recruiting. And so I think from that, it's really, are we continuously reflecting our skill sets and improving our skill sets relative to what's happening in the future? And AI is here. It has been here for quite a long time. But I think with Chat GPT, it's just made it so much more accessible to people, which is good because then we have opportunities to also learn about it. You want to understand the power of it, not be afraid of the power of it, and be able to leverage it to your benefit.
Yeah. So in true Accenture fashion, I will just pile on to what both of them said because we like to have our opinions. I think this is it's a huge opportunity. But with any new innovation or new technology, change is scary. People always have fear, uncertainty, doubt, or FUD. I think we're going to go, we talk about things like ChatGPT and generative AI. We're going to go from like iPhone 1 to iPhone 15 very, very quickly. And what's really important there is for everyone to embrace it the best they can. And the only way by embracing it is learning and trying it yourself. I think the verdict is out right now. Like AI is not going to replace white collar jobs. It's not going to happen. There's always going to be a human involved, but it's going to be more of like the human using AI is going to replace you eventually, right? So it's taking that leap. It's trying something new, bettering yourself, and adding some of those skills to your repertoire because it's going to become so much of our personal life, just like the way other technologies before us had come along. And we're going to have to just go with the flow in both our personal and our work lives.
I appreciate that. I go with the flow mindfully too, is what I'm hearing. I'm often reminded when I was a child, my father was a high school principal, and he came home furious several days in a row because he was trying to get the math teachers at his school to allow the students to use calculators. Calculators were brand new, and we had one that did square root. And he really thought this was going to revolutionize how much math students could learn. And he was furious, and he was bringing out all kinds of examples of when books started to be printed, and people said we shouldn't print books because nobody will memorize anything anymore. So this time last year, I sat him down and taught him ChatGPT at 89 years old, and as an English teacher, he was thrilled. Right? He could see all the opportunities too, and how he could teach writing more with this. But we have to be mindful about it. So actually, Chris, let's stick with you for a minute on that mindfulness piece of it. Bias, inherent. So we're talking today about inclusion, about recruiting, right? And so the biases that can come in when these bots are making it, how do we understand it? How do we think about it? How do we get rid of it?
Yeah, so I would say there's biases. There's always going to be biases in everything, whether it's human through an entire process of recruitment or a piece of technology. You just have to be aware of what those biases are, and you have to have the right governance to be able to evaluate the risk and determine whether or not, is this safe to use to make decisions from. The biases will never go away. There's never anything that's 100% risk-free for anybody that's ever built a model or anybody in banking. Or insurance for that matter. But I think awareness is one in education. And second is getting the right kind of policy standards and ultimately the controls in the way that you monitor how this thing is being used. You have to be very clear to your customers or potential candidates that you're using AI and how you're using AI to maybe screen their resume. They're like, Accenture's trying really hard to do some of this stuff to ourselves in the way that we're reinventing using AI for our company. Like when we post requisitions now for jobs, we actually look for biases in the way that it's written. But perfect example is
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, perfect example is you need 5 years of Canadian experience in model risk management, for example. Not completely relevant. Like 5 years
That
of
sounds
model risk,
exciting.
5 years of model risk management in Australia, in somewhere in Europe, or anywhere that matters, should matter. So it's like little things like that will, it provide, it, you know, someone might see that and then they're like, oh, I can't apply to this, right? There's that. There's things like, you know, the way that the capital markets, for example, right, is an aggressive environment sometimes. There's like A-type personalities. And so it's like, how do you change the language in a way that it's not discouraging people to actually apply to it across all areas? So there's things like that that we're doing and we're implementing. But there's so many other ways in which we should be using information not only to create a job, but where those job requisitions actually go outside of the traditional networks that we use. But I'll stop there.
It's okay. I can tell Jennifer's
Yeah.
trying to jump
Yeah.
into it. I'm sure Carolyn is too. Yeah.
I was just going to comment further on that because as I was thinking about AI and recruiting, which I hadn't thought of as much as I have now for this panel discussion, I was thinking about how do we, because the typical conversation you have around recruiting in AI is the bias potentially for people who are being recruited. But I would love for us to think about how do we leverage AI in the context of recruiting to look for systemic bias in our processes. And you called out an example of that where the way we craft the job description in the first place is problematic, or the way in which our recruiting process unfolds is problematic. And to have an AI solution that would go inside the shop and analyze the recruiting process for bias, I think would be really powerful. So I think, again, that's an example of how do we use it to people's benefits while being thoughtful about the risks.
I'm sure Caroline, you've got more to add on this too.
Well, things to add as well would be the way that when I think about some of my clients utilize this, so it's not just the Accenture is the only one that's thought of that, is how they've used AI for recruiting, and Chris referenced how we do as well. A number of areas. We talked about job descriptions, and but the key thing, I'm always thinking about what do you do to make sure you can provide the best view of your company and the best view of the role with less bias, is to make sure that you've written the appropriate job description. So for your role, you need to know what your roles are, and there's it's a fact that men and women look at job descriptions and requirements for job descriptions in a different way. So, you know, all the and statements you need for project manager, PMP, and. Do you really need that? Or is it enough to say you only need, as you're talking about, do you need to have Canadian experience or just experience? So we spent a lot of time looking at how job descriptions are written, and you can use AI really to help your organization. That's why a lot of my clients do that in terms of how the job descriptions are written, but they're only as good as they're created. Another thing is, I mean, as I said earlier, no one's really looking at resumes individually. And yes, they are looking at people's social media feeds. As I tell my daughter, do you really need to have those drinking pictures up? Like, let's really, anyway. So, and she doesn't. But
it's not authentic.
yeah, well, you know, she's in semester 2, anything can happen.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can use AI, and what I'm seeing with our recruiting teams and our clients' recruiting teams, it's a multi-pronged approach. And rather than having our recruiter scanning, looking, right, they're using these things to pull all the information about someone. Now, you as an organization, based on privacy laws, can then determine what is it that you want to do to assess. And I mean, I joked about social media, but then there, depending on the country, what are you using to assess? So some clients, depending on the role, they go really, really deep in terms of what they look at. And it's really up to your organization, how far you want to go. And then also finally communications. So booking interviews. And, you know, for some companies, you're going through 4 or 5 in consulting interviews. and very hard to schedule. You're just talking about 4 or 5 interviews for one person. And it's a very hot job market. It's a war for talent. And people want to know that you're still interested. So people have fed in all types of things around, not only are you going to be booking these 4 or 5 interviews, but how do I keep sending teasers out so you know I'm interested? I'm going to keep sending information. And I know because I've asked, I'm going to keep sending information. So this is what, this company is doing. Did you know about it? Are you still interested? We want your skills because of these reasons. But it's only as good as the bias reduction. And so you really have to be very honest in your organization. What is it that you want to portray about yourselves? And also in terms of recruiting people, what is the type of workforce that you want to try to bring in?
I really appreciate all of those perspectives. I was thinking about some of the companies I've worked with, a lot of, especially 25 years ago, top management teams that were all men, right? And I remember one time going through this description of the job descriptions, and they all looked at each other and they said, have you ever actually read a job description before saying you wanted the job? And they all said, no. You look at how much it makes, what's the budget, and who does it report to? And that's why would you look at anything else, right? So, and I think things have changed since then. But one of the questions that I like to challenge senior leaders with is, what do you not want diversity about? Right? What do you not want diversity about? Right? And it better be related to your business model and your value proposition. We don't want diversity around our values. We don't want diversity about caring for it and compassion for the customer. And then how can we make sure, because I think you're right, there's never no bias, but how can we make sure that the bias that's there is in service to what we don't want diversity about? And what I'm hearing from you is very consistent with that, and that AI can both really help in that conversation by providing the analysis and then also help in the execution of the decision and the following up on it. Well, that sounds really optimistic. I like that. Good. I've got a couple more questions here, and then I'm going to be turning it over to you because I'm sure you've got lots of questions too that are coming. Do you mind if I ask a couple more? Get us warmed up? Okay. So you're also a coach. So, and we've already talked about this a little bit from the applier's point of view, right? The career point. But what advice do you give to people, or how do you help people talk through the scariness of this from the individual point of view? Now, we've provided some practical advice, right? Make sure your resume has the key words. But from a leadership development point of view, what kind of advice do you give clients on that? And then I'd love to hear the others as well. Yeah.
So when we talk about bias and we talk about recruiting in particular, I'll just call out, like, separate from AI, one of the biggest impediments I've found, especially for women, is the bias they have against themselves. And it really is how deeply you believe in your marketability, how deeply you think your skills are fabulous. And I really challenge people to think about, if you believed you were phenomenal, how would you write your resume? Not in the context of making up something that's not true, but of course there's many different ways to represent yourself. And as humans, the way we tell stories, the way we use adjectives, like all of that stuff really, really matters. And we have control over those things. And I am actually recruiting right now. So if there are any really awesome data people, please come my way. So I am seeing a lot of resumes. I'm in the middle of recruiting processes, and there is a stark difference in terms of the vibe you get from different people's resumes. And I can tell when somebody is super solid, confident, because it's not just the words, you can tell they were written from that place. So don't underestimate the value of putting yourself in the space of you being absolutely phenomenal, and see how differently you would write your resume, see how differently you would show up to an interview. So that's number one, and hugely concerning for me, the amount of women who are struggling with really embracing how marketable they are and knowing how marketable they are. So that's number one. The other thing, again, completely independent from AI that I don't think will go away ever, is the power of relationships and networking and having a sponsor. And I can tell you, given what I've been going through, we have a very thoughtful recruiting process, of course. But if I have someone in my network who knows someone amazing, I am screening them for sure. Right? And so that's really, really important. How diverse is your network? Racial diversity, industry diversity, people inside your company and outside your company. Really important for you to think about the power of relationships. And that also includes, like, I've developed relationships and trust with people just because I was their colleague. And when I showed up every day at work, I showed up the best I could, and they remember that, right? So, and I'll just offer lastly, when you think about your networks and your sponsors, for me, if somebody provides me or connects me with their network as a hiring manager, it's a huge gift. And also for me, when I left corporate, I thought I had retired from corporate, and I ran my own executive coaching business. And then 8 months in, I'm like, oh my God, I miss corporate, which was really strange and shocking. And then the reason I found this role was 100% through my network. I reached out to someone I knew. I hadn't talked to them for 2 years, but when we had worked together, we had a great relationship. And this is how things happen, right? So independent AI will help, but do not underestimate the value of investing in your network.
And I think a couple of things I hear behind what you said. The first part, making sure that you develop your resume and your cover letters and that from a place of strength. That's always been good advice for women, right? But it sounds like with AI, it might be more important.
Yeah, and being very intentional, as was suggested here, right? Using, like, be thoughtful about what keywords, how to make sure you can represent yourself as leaning into the future, understanding the way in which technology may be used to evaluate what you're writing.
And then on the flip side, the relationships are as important. It's not like that's diminished. Yeah.
And I'll just add to that, like when I was being recruited, people in my network are like, oh, CIBC reached out to me and asked me about you. Like, just behind the scenes checking in. And of course we do this, right? Like we do gut checks because you're meeting with people for 45 minutes, for an hour. So that matters.
But how about both of you? I mean, so if we go to you, Chris, you have a lot of women around you, not just at work, but also at home. What advice do you give to people?
So I've been pretty fortunate at work as well. Like our team, especially in the data and AI space, which has always predominantly been males, we have a fair amount of great women on our team. I would say, going through the process, I still do review resumes. Our recruitment team brings a lot of different perspective. Majority of them are women. So they help remove biases. But more importantly, I would say from an advice perspective, everything Jennifer said is spot on. In all of those discussions, whether you're meeting with a female leader or a male leader, just be yourself. Be who you are. Be authentic. That will come through very quickly in the first 5 minutes, and you will either reciprocate with the person you're talking to or not, and you'll quickly realize whether your values and morals kind of line up to that person and that organization. But trying to be something that is in the job description that is not you, or in your resume that you don't feel like is a true representation yourself is, it's all about being yourself.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And just to round out that topic, what I would say is you being yourself, you have to also know yourself. So get that sponsor, mentor, write up that resume, but you need to be self-aware, right? I see a lot of folks who you get some of these resumes and you're like, I know you. This is not you. Or I know you and I don't see what you're good at on here. So I think before you even put pen to paper, you need to be introspective about yourself. This is not an aspiration, hopeful. I mean, they're good, nice, punchy words, but you need to be realistic with what you bring or what you even aspire to be. because this market is small, right? In Canada,
Mm.
you know, you're always only maybe 2 steps away from somebody who knows someone else. And people, as you just talked about, folks, especially for more senior roles, they're not just going through a formal recruiting process. They're asking their friends and their network. And if you're not capable of this work, have never done this work, even if you're changing careers and you've done something else, but if the skill set is lacking, people will hear about it, right? So of course, don't burn bridges. But I think every year, something that we do in our family, we check in with ourselves. What do we want to learn this year? What do we want to accomplish this year? What do we then update this year about ourselves? And so I would say for yourselves, really be introspective, ask friends. That feedback that you've gotten at work, sometimes the performance appraisal, people say, oh my God, they're like doing these bad things, they don't like me. No, if someone's giving you feedback and it's something that you want to work on it instead of spending time saying, you know, you just don't really know me. So really be introspective. In addition to all the other great feedback, really be introspective about who you are and your capabilities. And once you are, make sure that your resume reflects that. And when you're sitting in front of someone, make sure that comes out in your words.
So again, what I'm hearing, a lot of the advice doesn't really change. And, you know, I'm often asked, how do you motivate people differently in this new area? Well, how we motivate people actually hasn't changed. But what does change is some of the mechanisms and therefore the implications for how you implement that. Right. So, yeah, really good practical advice. Can we switch gears now again to look from the organization's perspective? And I'd love to hear, and we can start with you, Caroline, some things that you've seen organizations do that using AI that really help with inclusive recruiting and inclusion.
I think what I've seen that's worked really well, in addition to the things I talked about, job descriptions and, you know, resume review, et cetera, is first you need to set a realistic goal for your organization. What's your target? And not to be a target of, I know, you know, the company I'm competing against does this or does that, but to really be aware of what you as an organization are interested in and what you're going to set that target, publicize it, and look to achieve it.
Do you mean like a demographics target, or what kind of target?
So, you know, and I work in that DEI space. So if you have a target, whether it's related to ethnicity, gender, you know, if you want if there's a target about you just increasing the size of your group, but not to go into it willy-nilly and with a set of hope. It's nice to have hope. Don't lose that. But what I've seen that's worked really well for any organization is first you set a target and you publicize that, and you set a plan as to how you're going to achieve that. And if AI is something that you have set out, right, we have a definition of what job descriptions could be, an understanding of the types of folks that we want to hire, then you go for it. But inherent biases always exist. You can't get away from that. Everybody has biases. Right? We have unconscious bias training that we all have to do, not just executives in the organization. And first step is to know biases exist. Whether you say, you know, because people went to Ivy, only people from Ivy are good. I did an MBA, not at Ivy. I still think I'm good.
It's quite all right.
It's quite all right.
I think
she
you're
said
good
quite all
too.
right. But whatever it is, right? It's not, I'm not feeling that I'm being pressurized because of that, but you should just know biases exist. But as your organization, think about what you want to achieve and you move towards that target. What I've seen where people have failed is to say, I know what this company is doing. I know that whatever they're doing, they've publicized it. I'm going to do that. But you can't do that. You don't have an organization that moves to that rhythm. We've set a goal to be 50-50 men versus women next year, and people that identify as men or women as of next year, 2025. We set that goal 5 years ago. We operate in 120 countries and we have a plan. Canada has a plan. I mean, every one of those 120 countries have a plan. And if you're off it, you have people who are all over you to say, we know you're off it. What are you going to do to get on that plan? Somebody else that's in this tower, another organization, that may not be their focus. And they're very rigorous things we do to try to achieve that plan. Right? Yeah. So it's very important if you want to do that, then you need to think about, okay, if we need to be 50% men versus women, and we are not, we're more men than women. What do we need to do to attract more women and then retain? And so we are looking at research, et cetera. What can we do in each of these areas that we operate in to attract more women? It's very purposeful,
Right.
right? It's not just, I think I can, no.
Yeah.
It's you set a plan and you move towards that. You publicize it because it's not a name. Somebody just asked me last week, is it naming and shaming? No. You are showing your commitment to that plan. And even for you, forget about the whole organization. For me in my group, right, I'm responsible, I said, for technology financial services, that practice, we have a goal. And we publicize that.
Right.
And anybody can look at it. And people can come to me and say, you're doing this or you're doing that, right? I'm responsible for DEI in Canada. I'm the managing director sponsor. That is something that's publicized. And if I'm doing it well or wrong, at least I know at the back of my head, that's what I'm chasing
So
for.
set goals that are meaningful and plans that are really focused to get there
Focus to
and
get
be
there.
really accountable.
But they're yours.
Yeah. They're yours.
They're
Yeah.
yours.
And then the AI and the other tools help you to get that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris, I'd love to hear some examples too of.
So I don't spend a ton of time in AI, particularly like in the HR space, but I think I can share a few anecdotes of where it might be going. I think
Yeah, please.
outside of, the couple examples that we talked about now, we're seeing more and more clients use things like a Copilot or LLMs to analyze.
What does that mean?
Sorry?
What does it mean, Copilot?
Oh, apologies. It's Chat GPT that's baked into Microsoft products.
Okay.
Kind of, yeah. And just analyzing like phone calls in real time, mainly within contact centers and things like that. But imagine the future where someone is having a conversation with a potential candidate and the call is being analyzed and seeing where the conversation is potentially going and gives them kind of like the Google Maps on, you're introducing bias here. Maybe you might want to remove that and change the conversation to this. And this is where the conversation might end up, right? So there's
Interesting. Yeah.
that type of AI is kind of coming very soon. It's predominantly right now, like kind of in contact centers.
Yeah.
But like I see an application of that.
Yeah, I can see it
There.
both for training and then also
Yeah.
for guiding the call as it goes, right? Oops, don't go there, right?
Yep.
You're about to step on something, so don't. Yeah. Yeah. You have another one? You said I have a couple.
Oh, yeah, you're really putting me on the spot here, Martha.
You want us to go to
Yeah,
Jennifer?
Jennifer
so we
might
can
have
come back?
one. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's, I don't know about you, but it's really helpful for me to hear a few just very specific examples of how AI can help, how the technology can help us be better. And that helps me imagine what we might be able to do.
I didn't have another use case, but as a chief data officer, when you were talking about recording interviews, I was thinking of privacy. So
Yeah.
it just also might be worth noting, as we talked about before, is when you start to, we all have encouraged you to make sure that you're understanding what innovation is coming, what AI might mean to you. But as part of that, also knowing what your rights are, what risks are, and what, especially in the privacy space. So that's what triggered.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would say we're having folks that have progressed to a certain level of interviewing and recruiting sign off that they're okay, that you're going to save this information about them, because people will then want, like, where are you saving this data?
Yeah.
So if you're going to do this type of research, like for specific jobs, where are you looking and what are you doing with my data? So there's a lot more thought being given to, it used to be fast. Let's just make sure we document everything that we are finding. Well, documenting and where is that going? Because we have had clients that have had issues where they have captured information that there've been a breach or something.
Yeah.
And then people then wonder, well, why would you be contacting me? I don't know. I would not have, I've not shared any meaningful information, I think, with yourself. Yes, you have. And so, it's important for you to know, when we talked about interviewing and then the fact that there are bots that are out there looking at resumes, there are, bots that are out there creating job descriptions, that data is stored somewhere.
Yeah.
And as you progress through, as you think about, if you're on the internet and you go from place to place, folks ask, do you want to save your cookies? And there are people that feel very strongly about, I don't want you to save, I'm going to reject all, right? So it's really up to you to think about if a company then asks you, as you're going through this process, how do you feel about the storage of your information? You really put some thought into that.
And if I say, no, you can't store it, does that mean I don't
That-
get the job?
No. It means that there is, there's some places where, I know there's some clients where they will document whatever they can write in their notes.
Okay,
They will keep in their notes, but any documentation that you email them, resume, whatever, they will send back to you.
yeah, interesting. Good.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
It's a very
Yeah.
different world. And are you expecting then a recruiter to be a lawyer? No, but there are things that are being put in place to ensure, and not, I mean, I'm speaking, not just Accenture,
Right.
and other organizations with that kind of thought process of how do we capture that information on a contact center where they're going through, they're answering calls and they're going through, did everybody get the same equal opportunity to relay a certain amount of information? Could there be some
Yeah.
unfair bias? So, these are things that we're thinking about.
Oh, good. Those are great use cases. I forgot that idea. I have one last question, and then so warm yourselves up. And it is getting even deeper into the organizational side, data strategy. So from an organizational perspective, and we've touched on a couple of things, but how should the organization be setting itself up to properly integrate AI deeper into the recruiting?
So I'll take that. Obviously, I'm going to say at the base of everything is making sure your data is understood, has the right level of quality, is fit for purpose, is shareable in the ways that it's meant to be shared. And what Carolyn was also touching on was the idea of having consent, appropriate consent to use it. And that is frankly, I think, one of the biggest challenges and things that organizations are needing to overcome. The AI models and use cases are, really sexy and super cool to talk about, especially if you're in larger organizations. Access to the data, there is a lot that happens to make sure that the right data is fueling these models. And that is where there's a huge opportunity, and part of my mandate to help support being able to make the right data available to help power some of these great use cases. And so that's fundamental in terms of thinking about what strategy is important. And I would say on the flip side, when you think about smaller companies, they may have less complexity, but they actually don't have access to the data in the same ways. And I think access to data is also starting to open up. And so, as I said before, all of this presents opportunities to innovate, but it's also very powerful. And with powerful things, we need to respect them. So I would say in general, people's data strategies need to make sure they're inclusive of the business benefits and the values that you're trying to drive, and not at all being naive about the amount of foundational work that needs to happen around the data that you're using to fuel them.
Either of you want to jump in on that?
Okay. So, great answer. I'm going to pile on. So, data, everything data management, data governance, everything around what we call responsible AI is very, very important as it relates to, I would say, we're talking about human beings here, making decisions on humans, right? So that's high risk. That means there has to be a lot of mitigating kind of controls and appropriate processes in place before you can actually put something like this at scale in a large organization. Everybody wants to, do their experimentation in the POCs, but like when it comes to actually like showtime and using this thing using it at scale, it's tough to do. The checks and balances and getting the number of parts of an organization on board to agree is pretty tough, right? So I guess the questions you'd have to ask yourself is, one, do I have a single accountable senior leader in the organization that would own this from a governance perspective, or a committee? Second would be, do I actually understand AI and where it's being used in my organization and what it's being used for? And then the last would be, do I truly understand all of the risks? And if I understand the risks, how am I going to mitigate those? If you can't answer those three questions, shouldn't be building anything with AI, right? So it is part and parcel, like to Jennifer's point, the hard part is around people and process, much less the technology. The technology is actually the easiest part.
Thank you. I do have one more question, but I'm going to save it because I'd like to get other people's questions first. So what's on your minds? You came here. You must have come here at least with some curiosity. Hopefully you're getting some of that knowledge satisfied, but don't be shy. At the back, please, and then at the front here. And particularly around the recruiting and the inclusion, maybe okay. What application of AI have you seen that surprised you? Did I understand that? Yep.
That surprised me. That is a very good question. I would say I was actually a little bit caught off guard with Chat GPT use cases. I didn't realize that was a tech thing, but I am a tech person, so that's why I said use cases. So, and actually our good friend Nkichi is here and I'm calling her out. She's like, what? Her and I, for example, were doing LinkedIn Lives, and this was many, many months ago, and she pulled up ChatGPT because we were putting together a little summary of the episode that we were doing. And so the broad, easy, scalable applicability of it, I don't think it was surprising, but it was like, again, the power of it and the accessibility of it and how it happens so fast because AI's been around for a long time. So I think that was pretty transformational for me to just see how quickly we could pivot into it being broadly used by people who have all kinds of different backgrounds, has nothing to do with tech, right? So that's something I would call out.
And so I just got a note that I misjudged the time and we only have 2 minutes left. So I'm with apologies going to jump to my last question because I think it's a really important one and we might take 3 minutes, but I'd really like to hear from all of you on this one. There's a lot of speculation and maybe even research that AI is going to affect more women's jobs than men's jobs. So inequitable in the impact and have more of a kind of take more women's jobs away. Do you believe that? You know, we're not there yet. So do you believe that's going to be the case? And if so, how do we mitigate that? What do we do about it?
Very interesting. I think there's a lot of research that's out there and Accenture has done research on it. I think because of the types of roles that AI will be impacting, most of the people that are in those roles are women. So the data entry, contact centers, I mean, it's not a secret. Most of those roles, women are in those roles. And so the opportunity for organizations and for us ourselves at Accenture, we are actually making those kinds of changes where you can, before those things happen to you, whatever that is, an impact of your role or your team, then look for other opportunities that you can retrain, you can relearn, you can innovate. We've used the term innovation here a lot. Versus justifying why you would need to be in this specific role or whatever. This is something that's happening in an industry. The good news in terms of what we're seeing, it's not that things are being cut and people are not considering what happens to their people. Because by and large, most companies where AI has made changes to the roles, especially as most of those roles are female, they have looked for other things for females to do and for others to do.
So retraining and upskilling.
But not to wait until it happens, whether it's yourself or your team. Just think about your roles. and think about whether these are roles that can be done potentially by AI, and then your teams can do other things. More
Great.
high functioning.
Why don't we let Chris go next? And you can.
You stole what I was gonna say.
Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, I think it's all about superpowering everyone, right? Male or female, in the way that, there's probably a lot of tasks that we're going to be able to eliminate out of a certain job. But how are we super empowering people to actually get to do the stuff they've always wanted to, but never had the chance, right? That's where we see a lot of our clients thinking. It's not like, okay, well, I'm gonna deploy Gen AI in this contact center now, and 80% of you are not gonna have a job. It's more of how can we repurpose or retrain this 80%, the entire workforce, so they can do more powered by Gen AI, but they're doing more value-added tasks and more of things that they want to do, not about getting more widgets or more calls out the door in the day.
I appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead, please, Jennifer.
I would just add that I think what we're talking about here is there are systemic issues that we're not going to solve, and we've been trying to solve for a long time. Why do we have more women in, jobs that don't pay as much, or perhaps are more entry level, or like there's some deep systemic issues that with AI, without AI are we need to still overcome, unfortunately. And I would also just suggest things that are in your control is, again, when I said about really believing in yourself, knowing what your marketability is, it kind of relates to this too. And for more women, I would say we are more hesitant to make a move, or we're more hesitant to be in charge of making the move. I have had lots of conversations where we're waiting for something. We're like working our butts off waiting. And so there is, I think, just some really doing a check-in with yourself and finding your courage and understanding, like, how am I taking ownership of my career? Am I taking ownership of the moves I need to make and that I'm capable of making, and in fact making those moves and navigating your career with support from others. But at the end of the day, you are your own CEO. Like, you are the CEO of your life and of your career, and really understanding what that means in terms of your accountability. And I think the more we each individually do that, we will start to be in different jobs and have different representation within teams than maybe we've had thus far.
I like that. Yeah, thanks, because the combination of these answers is very empowering. Right? When I look deeper at this research, I realized that one of the characteristics of women in workforces across the world is a word, deference. Right? So women will do what needs to be done that nobody else is doing. And when you look at the jobs that are going to be first taken over by AI, they're all the ones that nobody actually wants to do, but they need to be done. So in fact, it can empower people to do other things. And we need to be proactive about seeing that as an opportunity. And then as organizations helping people to take advantage of that. Well, thank you so much to our panel. Really, I love the way that we pulled these topics together, really hot and important topics. And I think helping all of us take that agenda forward in our own lives, in our own organizations. So thanks very much for the opportunity to talk.